Twitless, get us started. What are we talking about today?
We are talking about Mark Millar's Nemesis Rogues Gallery. Now, this is a part of Millar's Millar World imprint. His Millar verse is kind of like an MCU with an independent creator at the helm. And there's been quite a lot of Netflix and other deals being made for these to be made into shows and I think films and such. Um, so like Super Criminals or Super Crooks, I think is one of them that I'm familiar with that I think was made into like an anime. So some of them are live action, some of them are anime, lots of different things there. This is like I said, this is the third appearance of this particular character, and the general pitch is what if Batman was the Joker? Essentially, that's I think the general pitch. What if you had a Batman level superhero who's always 10 steps ahead and has crazy, gadgets and fighting expertise. But what if he is just an absolute, horrific supervillain? And so the first series kind of played out a little bit like I don't know, like a crime thriller. And the second one focused more on the supervillain himself, Nemesis. And so, like I said, this is the third series, and this is in this one he's changing things up a bit. But yeah, it's interesting what he's doing with it.
It's interesting. Yeah. And so in this issue 1, I'm going to do my thing and come at this from a high level perspective with a lot of ignorance. Where the impression I'm getting, apparently he's been kind of killed off in a previous issue, like softly, and now he's been softly rebooted in some way, where he's a quadriplegic, and his bros break him out of some sort of military lockdown hospital, and then he's brought underneath Gotham, where there's a Babylonian temple with 1,000-year-old, I don't know, like satanic priests who can revive his body. It's pretty hardcore. It's really interesting to see the sort of direction they want to go with that. None of this screams Gotham. It doesn't even scream superhero to me, which is something that I'm sure we're going to talk about. But it is interesting that he kind of leads in that particular direction. I suppose that again ties into his Mark Millar universe with these tie-in characters, which are interesting in themselves. There's a Lilith character that apparently has tie-ins to another story that is particularly important to him. So he's kind of weaving this Nemesis character into his larger story universe.
So it didn't scream Gotham, but I did think the Blood Pool and the Revival and the Priesthood screamed Ra's al Ghul to me. So
Okay.
it's definitely drawing a lot of inspiration from the Batverse, and it closes off on this idea that he needs a sidekick. The big issue I had with this book was that not very much happens. He spends a good third of it laying in bed, grousing, and then he's freed, and then he's in this pool. You don't get a lot of setup, but maybe it happened in the previous books of who these characters are and why they're meaningful or significant. But they do have a contract with him, and he's agreed to pay what he's essentially getting as a service is 50 cut veins a day to bleed into this pool to facilitate his revival. Morbid stuff. So
there's also a monetary expense. What do you think about it? I don't know why he pulls the rug out from under his own the gravity of the situation by saying it costs $50. I guess that's just his attempt at a joke. It was cute, I guess.
So some of that is because again, it's meant to be a play on the Batman archetype, and so it's the idea that this is going to tax you in the mental, because Batman's supposed to be this like mental fortress, right? He's this guy who can meditate and has a mind over body, but he's also super rich, and so they're kind of like nodding, I think, to those two kind of archetypal things. Some of the other pieces that are important, I think, for diving into this particular book. Because, well, Red, you're definitely right. If this is your first experience with the character, it's kind of like, what's going on? Obviously, a guy in a hospital bed. This, I think, is kind of set in the the universe that Miller set up in the Wanted comic, which is very different from the film with Angelina Jolie. But basically, the pitch behind that is you had a superhero universe where all the supervillains ganged up and eliminated all the superheroes. So it is actually a universe with no superheroes in it, but the supervillains have essentially there are supervillains in it, but no superheroes. So it's like that kind of a universe where there's only a kind of Manichaean setup, right? Good and evil, but only evil exists in terms of the superpowers.
Right.
Now, that was the pitch for Nemesis, the first like two of them. By this third one, we have now, I think, switched that up. And so as opposed to the supervillains eliminating all the superheroes, the setup for this one was that the supervillains got basically eliminated by the superheroes. So the good side essentially has wiped out the bad side, apart from, I think, a few holdouts. Nemesis being one of them, and he was, his body utterly destroyed, and that's why he's in the bed the whole time. So the first two series that this character has shown up in, he's just 10 years ahead and, always just clowning on the forces of good. And so this is actually kind of a rare moment of seeing this guy in a vulnerable position. I think it's meant to be kind of a shocking. A lot of Miller's work is just shock, but this is meant to shock. Oh, the guy that I've set up as being this kind of almost invincible Batman villain is now, on the back foot. That's the general gist.
And despite his restraint, he's never quite vulnerable.
Yeah. Well, there's so many people. Almost everyone in this story is absolutely enthralled with Nemesis, the character. So I don't know how vulnerable he feels, other than that he's a quadriplegic temporarily. I mean, he's drawn in a very imposing way. We'll get to the art in a minute, but yeah, I don't get the impression that he's terribly. I don't know. Other than like sitting in a hospital bed, he still feels like everyone who looks at him is frightened.
Yeah,
and wish there was some sort of hospital orderly wishes that he was chained to the bed, even though he's paralyzed. So
I think that orderly enjoyed changing his diapers. He was trying to form some kind of bond with him. So he felt he was owed something once he was being freed, that they were bros, and he blinded him. So, it didn't quite go the way the orderly had hoped.
Is this consistent with this character across the previous issues, where he just eats people's faces just to show how hardcore he is?
He
because that doesn't sound like the opposite of Batman to me. I don't know.
So he's usually, I think, a little more. Yes, this is on. In fact, I would say this is a little more restrained than what some of the stuff he gets into in the first Nemesis series.
Interesting.
The first Nemesis series, he's basically choosing hero detective cops and then ruining their lives. And physically, morally, the whole deal, just kind of taking them to pieces. And what he does to this one cop's family in the other in that first series is I can't even repeat. It's so disgusting. It's
Wow.
vile, and I'm not going to repeat it.
This is easier in a way. This is just mere
violence,
body horror.
Just facial cannibalism. I mean, mild stuff.
No.
Yeah. Definitely an interesting character, to say the least. It's been optioned, I believe, for a Netflix series. So we can look forward to a lot more of Nemesis in the future. But we get to see the groundwork here in these series.
Miller has figured out how to get things optioned. And I think the reason why, and something, that I've thought about in the past, but his comics, the way they read, because there's very little in them, they're kind of shallow. It's just, very easy to read, simple panels that don't communicate too much at a single moment. It's very cinematic. It's kind of like reading a storyboard. which is exactly, I think, what these are. These are storyboard pitches to show to Netflix executives that they can easily read. Because if an executive had to read, Watchmen or older comics, they'd probably pick it up and go, oh, this is too hard on my eyes. This is too much to just cliff notes. Summarize this for me. And something about Millar's comics is that they are decompressed, cinematic, short film kind of comics, very easy to just hand to somebody and go, oh, that's what the pitch of this miniseries will be. And clearly he has cracked code, because so many of his works seem to be getting optioned, and they're original IPs. That's the thing, right? Is that it's easy to option like Spider-Man and even Madam Web because it's seen as valuable because it's tied to Marvel or something. But to get the amount of original IPs that Millar does, he either has some serious blackmail on people. I'm just kidding, or like I said, he's really mastered the art of making these comics into easy, digestible pitches.
Hopefully there aren't some Hollywood producers walking around with half-chewed faces. So
yeah, chicken bones in their eyes or something.
Exactly. Yeah.
Let's take a brief pause to hear from the awesome creators joining us today and find out what cool projects they're currently working on.
Hey guys, if you love sword and sandal historical fiction with a healthy dose of ancient Roman and Egyptian fantasy mixed in, then check out Kyrie. We've got 450 pages printed so far, a fourth book on the way. Order your books today at curiecomic.com.
Modern day, classic superhero storytelling. Get The Adventures of Omega Girl, issues 1 through 5, now on Indie Planet.
Thank you to our awesome creators, and now back to the video.
Well, let's talk about the art a little, Matt. What were your takes on it?
Yeah, well, this pairs, I mean, I think it contrasts well with what we saw in the Penguin origin story, Pain and Prejudice. So this pairs well with that because I think what's going on here, rather than photo reference, these are 3D asset references, which works really well if you've got people standing in rooms talking to each other or lying in beds. I mean, and again, we've talked about this before. We've talked about this several times now, but comics is the art of shortcuts in so many ways. A lot of the classic strengths of art in comics, whether it's spot blacks or speed lines or all these kind of things, are just ways of shortcutting to convey a narrative element. And I think it makes a lot. I mean, there's clearly the illustrator for this. Is it Valerio Giangiordano? I think he did a fine job. And he did a fine job with shortcuts, which is what you got to do in the biz, for Dark Horse. But it's clearly stuff. I think we could look around Sketchfab and find some things if we really cared, and we don't care to. But you could even see in the cover, some of these hands, they're not really gripping Nemesis. They're just kind of like G.I. Joe hand, kind of like maybe there used to be a gun inserted there. Like, what's going on? It's fine. It's fine. And it conveys, and again, I think there's a reason why most storyboards, this ties into what Twitless is saying. There's a reason why most storyboards rely heavily on 3D assets nowadays, because it's about taking dolls and moving them around in boxes and telling stories and putting the dolls' heads together and having them talk. I'm leaning into this. I know I'm sounding flippant. Again, like I think it's entirely okay to kind of use these sort of backgrounding reference points to build the final art, and I think they do a fine job of it here. But it's the sort of story you can do this with. You wouldn't be able to get away with this if there was a lot more action that was required. So I'll be interested to see when we do get more action, we don't just get this sort of backstory of a guy who's reclaiming possession of his body, of his physical faculties. When we actually get to see him fighting, can this kind of style, can the illustrator, can Valerio deliver on the actual action that's required for those scenes?
This is also my first Nemesis book. So for me, as a first-time reader, it's a little difficult to be dropped into this world and not know anything about the character at all. There's no real backstory given, and I understand that it's the third storyline in this series, but just a little bit of who he is and why these things matter would have helped a lot in carrying over the significance and importance of the events that were presented here in this book. Again, it was a bit of a shallow read. I know I mentioned that earlier. I think there wasn't much that happened. But as it progresses, it would be interesting to see if there are things that can converge. I don't know exactly Millar's approach to setup. And if this is just him giving us a slow burn and something that will pay off in later issues, as it is.
My issue is, and I do have to come out and lay my cards on the table here. I do not like a vast majority of Millar's storytelling. It's not my cup of tea. And Nemesis typifies a lot of the problems I have. He is just the king of edge, and he has brought that to whether it's Marvel's Civil War or Kick-Ass or even Super Crooks. Just the list goes on of just taking superhero toys and really just dragging them through the mud. Like I said, the first series of Nemesis is vile in spots. I can't even repeat some of the things this character does. But in trying to make a story that is about a super villain, he ends up, I think, making mistakes that superhero comics wouldn't even make. So I'll point out the fact that in superheroes, one of the things that we often see is, the need to limit a superhero's power, or else it just becomes like the story just becomes weak and pointless. Like if Batman just blinks and says, I have already defeated you, and everything just explodes, it's just, you have to have some tension, right? And so Batman, it has to become a little more fallible. And so his victory then gains some, dramatic tension. What's interesting is that Millar would set up Nemesis to be literally, I'm not kidding you, 10 years ahead. It's like this has all been set up 10 years ago. And it was like he knew you'd be standing in this exact spot 10 years from now. And it's like, I'm serious, that happens. And it's like, so by doing this deconstructive take, Millar ends up making mistakes that not even superheroes at their worst, Mary Sue, tend to not make.
Wow.
So he's violating even the most egregious examples that people would roll their eyes at in superhero storytelling, but it's a supervillain who is, when he wins, he's not only, he's doing something, like I said, in many cases, just vile and murderous, and in some cases, just unspeakable to sometimes innocent people, or people who, even if they are not perfect, just really don't deserve that level of malevolence directed at them. And there's just something deeply dark, and in some cases just sick. And there's like a sickness at the heart of a chunk of Millar's work. And I don't, it's hard to put your finger on it sometimes, but I don't like it.
Well, he's subverting expectation. And I guess if he's going to be the edgelord comic writer, then that's the market that he's trying to appeal to. There's people who like horror. There's people that like things that take things to an extreme and are graphic. So it could be argued that he isn't writing superhero comics. What is your impression of that?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, is there anything in the story world that screams? I mean, just in what issue? Is there anything super heroic or super villainous in a sense? I mean, take the capes out.
Mm-hmm.
I was gonna say, well, he's clearly like nodding to like the character wears the getup of the superhero. The characters, he wants at least the outside dressing of superheroes, including, like I said, the capes. And like I said, the capes are wildly impractical when you try to do like a gritty, real story, which is often what you do when you deconstruct, when many people do deconstruct the genre. So like I said, it ends up, being weird on that angle. There is something to be said about the fact that it's a super villain story. But in this case, this was supposed to be the universe where the superheroes did exist and had defeated the supervillains. So there's, he's sort of deconstructing his deconstruction, but then only to further the deconstruction by having this character like spit a chicken bone and impale a guy. Again, he's worlds above and beyond anything the forces of good can throw at him. So I don't know. Like I said, it deflates the tension, and that's I don't know. It's deconstructive in a very bizarre.
I agree that the Mary Sue, mechanism, but apply it in the supervillain setting is a bit, trite.
Yeah, villain Sue. Yeah, I think that they call it villain Sue, and
Villain Sue.
and the villain Sue here, like I said, is way beyond what normal superhero writing would even tolerate, which is bizarre.
Interesting.
That's an interesting take. Yeah, we'll see. Like, do people just want their villains to be Mary Sue's? I feel like the 2010s people did want that. But it's 2024 now. The current year, do people appreciate that? Is there room for that sort of thing?
We need vulnerability in our villains, and to see the hero's journey in the supervillains retelling. So yeah.
Yep. Like the HBO's Penguin.
Exactly. Yeah, that's actually interesting. Comparison there. All right. So final thoughts, guys. Looking forward to more Nemesis Rogues Gallery. Matsy.
I think I would agree the script might be a little thin, but I still think you can write a thin script well, where there's not bumpy dialogue. There's nothing that throws me out other than the $50 joke. I feel like it's a clean, dark, direct, like it's written by a clear professional. And so I'm willing to see where he plans to take this, because I know he typically has a point to where he's going, even if I don't. It's not the sort of point. It's not the direction I would prefer. He still knows what he's doing in terms of telling a beginning, middle, and end, and we just have obviously just a beginning here. So yeah, I'd be interested in seeing more.
Twitless.
Not really. This reminds me of Garth Ennis's The Boys. It's only barely better than that, or Warren Ellis's Planetary. I don't like any of that. The one thing this has that's better than The Boys is, in The Boys universe, there's really no there's only fake superheroism, because all the superheroes are just sexual degenerates and evil people. Like, there is no like tried and true like superhero character. It seems that Millar believes that a superhero can't exist even if like they get laughably owned or destroyed. You could still have like good people who are aspirational, that can still be a thing. And so that's a little glimmer, I guess, of hope that I want to see in superhero stories at bare minimum. But he's just takes such pleasure in just grinding that into the dirt, that I just no. And I've read enough of Millar's work I don't think that he can do something here that I would be genuinely surprised by and need to read. Having read like enough of his work to go, yeah, I kind of see where you go with things. So not particularly.
I'm not as turned off by the graphic and coarse malevolence in these stories. I enjoy it, but I do feel like I wasn't really given much to tantalize this series for me, and I would like to see a bit more. I'm going to have to dive into a couple more issues to see exactly where this is going, but so far this character has just been resurrected, for lack of a better term, and is ready to do something. So we will see.
Thank you very much for checking out the video. Subscribe, like, and stay tuned for more.